Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As you can tell, I am not John Johnson. He will be back with us on his regular Friday scheduled time slot. But in the meantime, I have an interview. I am interviewing today Amy Chan, who is the founder and chief heart hacker, as she calls herself, of something called Breakup Bootcamp, which is, according to the website, a scientific and spiritual approach to healing the heart. A team of experts ranging from psychologists, behavioral scientists to energy healers will help you rewire subconscious patterns so you can step into your power and create space for healthy love. Renew retreats are held in a luxury property surrounded by nature in Hudson, upstate New York, or Mendocino, California. Each retreat has under 20 women and are led by an all-female team of healing facilitators. 90% of past participants reported that the retreat made a significant impact on their healing process, and post-retreat expressed they felt increased levels of optimism, confidence, and self-love. So that is just a very brief description from the website. I am speaking today, as I said, with Amy Chan, who is the founder of Breakup Bootcamp. She is a relationship columnist and editor of JustMyType.ca and author of the upcoming Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart, all of which we are going to talk about in the interview with Amy. So let's go ahead and turn now to the interview with Amy Chan. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I am really excited to have you here to talk about your program called Renew Bootcamp. Before we get to that, though, if you could just start off by sharing a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Sure. My name is Amy Chan. I am the founder and chief heart hacker of Renew Breakup Bootcamp. We take a scientific and spiritual approach to healing and rewiring the heart. I've also been a relationship columnist for over a decade with a blog called Just My Type, and I study the psychology of attraction, of relationships, and love.
Interesting. Okay, so before we get to the program, I have another question for you. After that, how did you get into writing a relationship blog?
Yeah, so ever since I was young, the one thing I couldn't figure out and I struggled with immensely was my relationships. It seemed as if I could succeed in other areas of my life, whether it was getting good grades in school or advancing in my career. But when it came to love, I found myself constantly heartbroken and sad. And so I set out to do what every overachiever does, is I was like, okay, I'm going to crack the code of relationships. So I dived into studying relationships just as a hobby. And in one of my earlier relationships in my early 20s, when that relationship fell apart, I started writing my thoughts in a blog. And some people reached out and said that it was helpful. And it was the first time I thought, oh, okay, maybe I have something here. Maybe I'm a writer. So I just kept writing about it and pitched it to different publishers. Most people said no. One newspaper said yes. And I ended up writing for that paper for 7 years in Vancouver. And that was the launch of my writing career in relationships.
Fascinating. So, I love that you were able to take something that you were going through and that you wanted to kind of improve upon, and then it turned into this whole thing. How did it then go from writing about it to having this
boot camp type experience. It's a retreat program, right?
Yes, it's a breakup boot camp to help people after a breakup or divorce. So, great question. How did I start a breakup boot camp? Who wakes up one day and says, "This is what I'm going to do"? Well, the inspiration was through a heartbreak, and this was about 8 years ago. I was living in Vancouver, which was my hometown. And I was dating someone who I thought was going to be my life partner and that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And my whole future was set. I thought one day I would stop working, we would get married, I'd be a stay-at-home mom. I had everything figured out. And then one day, very unexpectedly and abruptly, our relationship fell apart. And when that happened, I fell apart. And I had put so much of my identity in him and in us that without the relationship, I just didn't know who I was. And I stopped eating. I had panic attacks. I had depression. I had thoughts of suicide. It was a really, really dark place for me. And through the months, I was able to get myself back up, and the worst of it seemed to have passed. But the emotional ups and downs would still come. And I had this resentment and anger that I was just carrying around with me for over a year and a half after that breakup. And so when I finally was able to move on and let go of the pain and the resentment and the suffering from that breakup, I realized that there wasn't a safe space for me to process the type of pain I was going through. And, during my time of trying to heal, I tried everything. I went to therapy, I did yoga retreats, meditation, Reiki, psychics, you name it, I tried it. But there was not one thing that was dedicated to the type of pain I was going through. And so the idea came to mind that I wanted to be the person to create this, the solution for people. Because while I was really lucky to have friends and family that supported me, I just thought about all the people out there that are suffering through a heartbreak that might not have that network, and how scary and dark that picture must be for them. So my idea was to set out to create a safe space in a beautiful environment surrounded by nature, where it's a luxury experience as if you're going away on vacation to a luxury hotel. But when you're there, there's all these different experts ranging from psychologists, therapists, coaches, energy healers. And basically, by the time you leave a little bit different. And you leave also with a support network of women who have also gone through the same thing that you have gone through. And that's how Renew Breakup Bootcamp was born.
Wow, which leads me to approximately a million more questions. Let me start by asking so you woke up one morning and you had this idea. How did it go from this idea to having multiple experts in the, how long was that process? How did you decide what kinds of people you wanted to have on hand? How did you set up the program, et cetera? I'm just kind of fascinated by how it went from idea to reality.
Yeah, great question. So, there was no recipe out there. A breakup boot camp, this is the first of its kind in the world. And so I was just starting from scratch. I had to create everything. And my starting point was I looked at when I went through my breakup, what did I need? And what helped and what didn't help. And so I kind of use that as my launching point of, okay, I needed therapy. I needed some help with calming my mind. I needed yoga. I needed meditation. I needed energy clearing. I needed nutrition, because what's very common is after a breakup, you're in survival state. And so your body puts your hunger almost on like lower in the priority of the totem pole. That's why a lot of people lose their appetite completely, because the body's fighting so hard to survive at that point, because they're dealing with this onset of intense emotion. So I didn't eat for almost a week after my breakup. And when your body is not in check, there's absolutely no way that you could start working on healing your heart and your spirit. And so, okay, a nutritionist was what I also needed to have. So I kind of looked at all the things that I needed, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to find the best of the best expert in this field. So I worked with a psychologist, a neuroscientist, a nutritionist, an energy healer, and I created a curriculum to start my first Breakup Bootcamp. My first Breakup Bootcamp, we had 5 experts. We've done many retreats for the last couple of years, and we now bring in 13 different experts. And so when you come to Breakup Bootcamp, the very first thing is you check in your phone. You have no digital devices, so you're not tempted to stalk your ex or wonder if they're messaging you or they're not, so that you can be fully present. And then it's go time. Our program from 8 in the morning till 11 at night, you are in programming, and it's back to back. And we do this intentionally because most of the time people have just decades of patterns and wiring. And what we're trying to do is really create a shakeup so that we can create an opening for new ideas, a perspective shift to actually even land. And so that's why we have this program that's super intense. And what we have found is the intensity of everything focused at one time over the course of 4 days has been really helpful.
Let's go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, Amy and I will be talking more about that sort of intense nature of the boot camp. 4 days, many hours a day. You can really see why it is called a boot camp, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that when we come back. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, and I will be right back.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Relationship Podcast. Before the break, Amy was speaking about the structure of the retreats and how the participants partake in those retreats. So let's go ahead and get back to that interview with Amy Chan.
It's 8 in the morning to 11 at night, you said, right? For 4 days?
Yeah.
As a major introvert, that sounds exhausting. Do you ever have people that are like, can I just go take a nap?
Totally, yes. And so, part of what we do is we do warn people who come that, rest up, like prepare yourself that this is going to be an intense experience. It's super fun, don't get me wrong. Like the first day that they arrive, everyone's generally the same. Their heads are down, they're slouched over. There's kind of this glaze in their eyes. And it's very dark. The energy is very, very dark. And the way that we do the program is the first day is really about processing what's going on, processing emotion in a healthy way, teaching them the tools of how to deal with sadness, with anxiety, with rumination. And then after that, starting on the next day, on Saturday, we then get into the psychology of the pattern. So we start to unravel. How did you get here in the first place? How did you get to a place where you feel like your entire world is over because you're not in a relationship? That's the real question. Because what we find every single time is it's never just about the ex. It's recycled pain. And if we do not find out what are those patterns, those belief systems that are lodged so deeply in the subconscious, we just keep recreating the same emotional experience over and over again with different people. So the entire program is kind of done in an arc, And by the time they leave on the Monday, it's as if you're looking at a different person. Their posture is different. They're smiling. They're laughing. Some of these people who haven't even cracked a smile in months are starting to finally remember how it feels to feel alive, to have inspiration for hope for the future. And it's a beautiful, beautiful transformation to witness.
And I can tell that you are definitely very passionate about this, which is great. You mentioned earlier that you had a support system and you were lucky in that, but not everyone has that. Another thing I would say is that, breaking up tends to be a cycle of grief as well. And so often, even when we have support systems, those support systems are like, it's been X number of days, months, whatever, get over it.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is really good in terms of having people who, they're not invested, so they can give you kind of an outside, unbiased opinion or viewpoint. But two, they are there to specifically help you through all of this, and they don't get to you don't have that yeah, whatever, get over it point.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that the worst thing you could say to someone who is in pain is just get over it. It is the absolute worst. It just adds so much shame. If the person could get over it that easily, they would. And so,
exactly.
And our friends and family, even my own, love them to death. My friends and family have great intentions. They were not equipped to give me the type of advice or the coaching that I needed. Right? A lot of us were very well intended, but it actually takes a lot of expertise and training and practice to actually be able to provide feedback in a way that's helpful. And so a lot of the times, without us even knowing it, we're projecting our own experiences, our own biases. And something that happens often is people tend to connect on pain. And so I don't know if you've ever experienced this. You might have had like a bad experience with someone, and maybe you go with your girlfriend or your guy friends, and you're like, oh my gosh, this person did this, what a jerk. And then your friends are trying to protect you and they love you. So it's like, oh, what a jerk. And they just keep going and going and going. And you get into this hate fest rabbit hole. And it feels really good when you're in the moment, right? It's just like eating junk food. It feels great. And then after that conversation, you feel horrible. And it's this negative charge. And so one of the very first rules that we set when people come to Renew Breakup Bootcamp is there's no unsolicited advice. So the participants are there. They've invested their time and money to come to a space where experts are there to give them the feedback and the coaching. Do not give each other that advice where you're not equipped to. So I think that's, you made a great point. It's like getting out of your environment of even your friends and family who may love you but may not know how to support you and say shaming things like, just get over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or just allowing you to, or not allowing, but enabling you to wallow in the hate or in the bitterness or the bashing part of breaking up.
Yeah.
How many retreats do you do in a year?
We do 4 breakup boot camps a year, and we are about to launch a second boot camp called Renew Power Play. And this one is all on the psychology of power dynamics, because what we have found after throwing Renew Breakup Bootcamp, the one thing that is the commonality that every woman that comes has an issue with is power. And so a lot of these women are achievers, A-type people, and they might be killing it in their careers and feeling very powerful in many parts of their lives. But when it comes to their relationships, they feel very disempowered. And so we've created a whole other boot camp. This is kind of like the second one after you go to the first one, which is centered around power dynamics.
Interesting. And when is that starting?
We've already did a beta test of it, and the official launch is going to be June 19th of 2020.
Okay. Where are the retreats located? What part of the country?
Yeah, so we currently host them in upstate New York in a 120-acre private estate. And then we also host them in California in a retreat center in Mendocino, so close to San Francisco.
Okay. Thank you. I know also you're very busy because you have a book coming out in September. How is the book, would you say, similar, or, how is getting the book maybe different from being a participant in the retreat?
Yeah. So the book that I'm publishing is called Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart. It's being published by HarperCollins and comes out September 22nd. And so this is for the people who can't make it to Breakup Bootcamp, right? I mean, being able to spend the time to travel across the country. Some people come like from all over the world to come to Breakup Bootcamp. It's a big investment, and we only allow 20 participants each time, and we sell out every boot camp. So not everyone can make the actual physical boot camp, which is a really incredible experience because you're surrounded by a support system. You get to experience everything with other women in relation. But I wanted to create something for the people who aren't able to make that investment. And so the book is really taking the tried and tested methods that we have used at Breakup Bootcamp and teaching you how you can do it on your own in a book format. And it weaves in a lot of my own personal narrative and my own, struggle and losses and, learnings in love and different relationships, as well as it weaves in the stories of a lot of the women that have come through Renew and their different issues and their perspectives and what they did and what worked for them. And so, the book, Breakup Bootcamp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart, it's a great starting point if you aren't able to make it to retreat, but it shares everything from how do you deal with anxiety, like what are practical tips when you feel that kind of surge of panic coming because you're missing someone or you saw a photo of your ex on social media, like what can you actually do? And so the book really marries science and spirituality with really practical advice, and it delivers it in a really fun narrative so that you feel connected to the different people of the book and the different stories.
Interesting. Thank you so much.
Time now to take our second break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking a bit about, are the retreats just for women? Will they be retreats for other groups in the future? So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Relationship Podcast and my interview with Amy Chan, founder of Breakup Bootcamp.
The retreats are for women, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So I can just imagine, I'll play devil's advocate here a little bit. I can just imagine that there are people out there who are like, well, what about men? Okay. And, obviously you don't want a mixed group because you want people to feel safe. And so then I can just hear what about gay men? What about this person? What about, do you get any of that pushback about why don't you have a retreat like this for X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, and it's not so much pushback, it's more of interest. I get a lot of men emailing saying, is there a men's retreat? I really want to go. And I think it's beautiful. I think that, the taboos of talking about your emotions, they're starting to get lifted. And so more and more men who might have been socialized to think talking about your emotions is bad, or showing, tears or pain is bad. I think we're having a cultural shift where we're all understanding that we are human beings having a human experience, and these are the feelings that are part of being a human. And so there's a lot of interest, and I do want to do a retreat for men that is in the vision. My goal right now is, I'm still bootstrapping this business, and I'm a startup founder, is I want to really get this boot camp and the second one really systematized and done in a way so I can duplicate it and, keep expanding those and increasing the frequency of them. And then once I do that, then I can create the men's version of the boot camp.
I appreciate that there are men that have interest in it, because like you said, there is that stereotype. There are those social constructs of how men are supposed to act and react in situations like this. So that would be an interesting, the dynamics of that boot camp might be a little different because of social constructs and how men have been to talk about their feelings.
Yeah, for sure.
What else? I've asked questions. I've kind of rambled at you, but what else what else are you excited about in terms of this program that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I mean, my whole goal is, I feel like I have a mission in life, and that is to turn my pain of what I went through and have that be able to help someone else in their journey. I think that when we can make meaning out of our pain, that pain alchemizes. It could turn into creation. It could turn into this positive force. If you don't make meaning out of your pain, that's when it could spiral into suffering. And so I went through a lot of heartache in my life. And when I look at it, when I even look back at that relationship that I had when I was living in Vancouver and the inspiration behind Breakup Bootcamp, I realized that I fell apart after that breakup, not just because of the breakup with my ex, but it was because it ripped off a Band-Aid of all the prior hurts, all the prior heartaches that I never dealt with. And that initial heartache started with the relationship that I had with my father. And so, it really was everything at once I had to face. And that's why it was so intense. And so, I really want to help people with the breakup experience, because I don't feel that a breakup is bad news. I think that there is a messenger in pain. There are lessons for us to learn that we can use to evolve ourselves, to have a healthier relationship with ourselves, and then with the rest of the world. And I really believe that the broken heart is like a weapon. If you don't nurture and heal your own heart, that is going to cause a ripple effect. You will continue to hurt other people as you hurt yourself, right? If you think about anyone who has ever hurt you or discarded your heart or disrespected you, that comes from a broken heart. And so if we can make one difference, even if it's really small, is to start to tend to our own heart. Because as we heal, as we become more conscious, there is going to be a positive ripple effect. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I hope that, more people can, use these times of breakups and see that the breakup is really the shakeup sometimes, that you need to redirect your life.
I am sure you get a lot of questions from a lot of people wanting to know some of your most basic tips in terms of getting through a breakup. So can you sort of encapsulate some of the advice that you give or the answers that you give to those questions?
So one of the questions I get all the time is, how do I get over a breakup? And while I would love to tell you that in X amount of days, you will get over the breakup and everything's going to be fine, the reality is it's going to be different for everyone. And so there are certain things that you can do that can help you with this emotional roller coaster that's going to happen. The whole point of everything that I teach is not to take away your pain. It is to help you process your pain in a healthy way, and so that you can actually start to learn the lessons from that pain, so that you can start to rewire your own patterns and shift any unhelpful beliefs that you have on relationships. And so if you are newly separated, one thing to understand is that your brain is actually in withdrawal. And so what does this mean? They've done research that looks at the brains of people who have been newly separated. And what they have found using an fMRI machine is that the part of the brain that is activated is the same part of the brain that's activated as a drug user who is fiending for their next fix. They're literally in withdrawal. And so when they look at the part of the brain of someone who's going through a breakup, think about it. Your brain is fiending for your ex. It's as if your ex is the heroin. It's the drug. And so that is why you're getting all these withdrawal symptoms. You're not going crazy. This is very normal. And when you're in the thick of it, it feels like this is going to last forever and that you're never going to get better. The good news is it's eventually your chemicals are going to recalibrate into a new to a new foundation and homeostasis that accepts the reality without your ex. But that's going to take some time. So yes, it's going to sting, and yes, it's going to go away at some point in time. Now, there's certain things that you can do that can actually minimize how long this period of suffering is. Number one is to cut off communication. That means block their number off of your phone so you're not wondering if they're messaging you or not. Remove them off your social media and delete their photos. If you have traces of them in your apartment, such as pictures, clothes, pack it in a box. Ask your friend if you can leave it at their place. You want to remove anything that reminds you of that person. The reason why is because you have neural pathways in your brain that have been firing together when you've been in this relationship. It's used to getting its fix of dopamine, this feel-good pleasure chemical from your relationship. And so you actually need to start starving off those neural pathways and creating new ones. And what happens is if you start to, instead of getting your dopamine fix by stalking their social media, which gives you a little bit of a hit, or calling them or showing up at their house, and instead you start to replace those things with healthy ways of getting dopamine, such as seeing your friends, getting endorphins from working out, what happens is you create new neural pathways and the old neural pathways start to prune away. That is why absolutely no contact is the best way to go. And if it's hard for you to do that in the beginning because maybe you guys had an amicable breakup, you can just set a boundary. You could tell the person and say, hey, I really need this time to recalibrate and just, build my foundation and get strong again. And so for the next 3 months, I'm going to completely cut contact. And after 3 months, I'll see how I feel. And if I feel up to it, I'll reach out. But otherwise, please respect my boundary and don't contact me. So that's, one way that will help you. Another thing is anxiety is very common to feel after a breakup. You're feeling the pangs of separation. The psychological term of this is primal panic, and you basically feel like it's life or death. And so your body is reacting as if it's in a survival state. And so one way to help you with this is when you feel that onset of panic, maybe you heard news that your ex moved on or something just really triggers you. What you want to do is you want to do a state change. And so basically what's happening, if you were to figure out what's happening in your body, is when you're triggered, you have all of these chemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, that are running through your body. And if you don't do anything with that energy, it's just going to stay pent up inside, and it's going to really, cause an issue and keep growing. What you want to do is you want to actually expel that energy. And so if you just excuse yourself to the bathroom and for 2 minutes you start shaking or do jumping jacks, what that does is it allows that surge of cortisol and testosterone and adrenaline to actually move through your body. And then after that, you want to just do deep breaths. Something that happens is when we feel anxiety is our breaths get really short. And so you really want to do what I love is the 4-7-8 technique. You breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7, you breathe out for 8. And what that does is it starts to calm your nervous system down. So those are 2, quick tips for you. Cut off contact and stop scrolling their social media. That's your brain tricking you to try to get dopamine in a healthier way, and do the state change whenever you're feeling that anxiety or that surge of panic coming through you.
Thank you so much for that.
It's time now for our final break of the podcast. When we come back, we will be speaking about, again, the structure of the retreats, how they are structured for each individual's own unique situations, how every relationship and breakup is not the same, of course. So how the retreats deal with the individualities of every person's circumstances. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, and I will be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Relationship Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with Amy Chan.
As you were speaking, I was thinking about, there's a million different variables for people. And so in terms of the boot camp itself, I would assume that because you have so many different people that the participants interact with, that you are able to then take this I'm going to say generic, but I don't mean that in a derogatory way. You have to start with that kind of overarching theme. But then what about people who have experienced maybe violent relationships or emotionally abusive relationships? What about people who have broken up, but they have children, so they can't cut off contact? How do you then deal with all of the different variables that people are going to bring with them to the retreats?
Great question. So at our retreats, we have a range of different people who are coming in from, different parts of the world with very different experiences. And we've had people as young as 21, all the way up to like 69. And so it's a very wide range. And so what we do at Breakup Bootcamp is there's a lot of sessions that are group sessions, and we teach general tools on how do you handle emotions, how do you handle anxiety, how do you communicate effectively, so that you create your own toolkit. And throughout the weekend, there's 13 experts. So we're all providing different tools and methodologies. And some things are going to resonate more than others. And the goal is by the end of the boot camp, you have your own toolbox, and you take a little bit from here, a little bit from here, and then when you go back home, you start to practice those things. And it's really going to be, we'll give you a lot of information and hold your hand and guide you so you can start to understand and see the different tools out there. A lot of these things that unfortunately they don't teach you in school. And you create your own customized kind of toolkit of what works for you. We also offer private sessions. And so there is a part at the retreat where you can choose from one of the different private facilitators. So there's a life coach, there's an intuitive guide there, there's a dominatrix there, there's a tantra healer there. So you can choose, oh, this person really resonated with me. I'd like to learn a bit more. And often what happens is after the retreat, participants will find one of the facilitators that they really resonated with and continue to do private coaching with them. We'll also be offering group coaching, so just to help the women after the retreat stay accountable and kind of have like a plan and action as they integrate back into their regular lives.
Actually, that answered one of my questions, was what happens after this? Because I'm sure, from my own experience, I know that when I go to something like this and I feel great at the time and I have all these different plans and, I'm just going to go kill it. And then you get back out to the regular world and it's like, okay, never mind. How much?
You bring up a really common experience, and we really, emphasize to everyone, they leave on a high. Like when they're leaving, it's like a group of super women who are ready to conquer the world, which is amazing.
Sorry. Oh, give her a second. Yeah. See the upgrade, not really an upgrade. Okay. They're on a high.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
Yeah. So when the women leave the boot camp, they're on a high. And what's really important is we tell them that healing is not it's not linear. It's going to go up and down. There's going to be, a week where you feel like, okay, I'm over it. And then something will trigger you. You might hear a song or see a photo, and then you're, back in fetal position crying. This is normal. It's if you look at it at the process as if it's 100 steps, it's just about taking one step and then another step. And just because you get triggered and maybe you even call your ex or maybe even get back together, it doesn't mean that all your other steps are for nothing. And so it's really important to understand that it's degree by degree, step by step, and the steps eventually add up. And, I think what's really important is there's no one thing that's going to heal you. No one can heal you but yourself. All we can do, whether it's going through Breakup Bootcamp or going to a therapist, whatever your type of healing modality you prefer, there is no magic button. All that someone can do is provide you the tools and the guidance and maybe even help hold your hand and hold you accountable. But it's the integration that's going to create the change. And that integration requires small changes that you make every single day. It's a disciplined practice of doing a change behavior on a daily basis, whether that's writing in a gratitude journal every day for 30 days, whether it's starting a meditation practice, whether it's learning how to pause that minute you feel triggered and you want to react and send 5 angry text messages. It's doing that on a daily basis that creates new neural pathways that actually add up to create great transformation and rewires your programming. And so I think that for anyone listening out there, whatever type of situation you're going through or pain that you're in, and whatever type of therapy or healing modality that you seek, have that in mind. It is the integration and it is up to you. And it's not this overwhelming amount of work that you need to do. Break it down to small, achievable steps. What is the one thing you can do every single day? Do that for 60 days. Have a focus, and then you will start to see things change. And that positive feedback loop helps you propel you into the next stage.
Thank you for that. I know you have a website. Tell people where they can find the website as well as where they might be able to interact on social media.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find more about Breakup Bootcamp. Go to renewbreakupbootcamp.com. And you can follow me on Instagram. You can find me at Miss Amy Chan. That's MissAmyChan. And the Renew Instagram is at Renew Your Heart.
And I believe you also have a YouTube channel. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can also find me on Twitter, on YouTube, at Miss Amy Chan. It's all the same.
Okay, that makes it easy enough. Great, thank you so much. And thank you for bringing your insight and your passion and just your enthusiasm for this. I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Once again, thank you so much to Amy for joining me. You can tell that she is truly passionate about the work that she is doing, that she is working hard to help women heal and move forward after breakups, which are really a process of grief, as we talked about. So thank you so much to Amy for the work that she is doing, the passion that she has for that work, and for taking the time to speak to me about that work. As always, if you are a fan of this podcast, I would encourage you to subscribe to it, to like us on all of our social media, follow us, retweet, do all those wonderful things that help us out. But definitely subscribe to the podcast so you can get new episodes as soon as they come out. And if you could give us a 5-star review, that would be fabulous. I would really appreciate it. John would really appreciate it as well. And speaking of John, he will be back for Friday's episode. So join him on Friday to talk more about relationships. In the meantime, hope you're having a wonderful week. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.